Who could have imagined that the silent, watchful woman mopping the polished marble floors of the illustrious Pinnacle Capital Partners was the same person who secretly owned controlling interest in the very hedge fund, whose founders mocked her daily? No one, to the army of sharp-suited, predominantly white financiers who swaggered through the gleaming Manhattan Tower. Marigold was just a help, a middle-aged black woman in drab-gray janitorial scrubs, her hair hidden under a simple scarf, her gaze perpetually downcast as she pushed her cart of cleaning supplies through the hallowed halls of billion-dollar deals. To the founding partners, especially the smug, silver-haired Charles Winthrop III, she was a moving piece of the furniture, useful only for wiping away the spilled cognac after their late-night victory celebrations. The humiliation was a ritual. It was in the way Charles would hold his cigar ash over a freshly cleaned ashtray she was emptying, forcing her to wait, his eyes cold with unspoken superiority. It was in the way the junior analysts, fresh from Ivy League schools, would toss their empty takeout containers near the bin, never in it, smiling as they said, "Earning your keep, eh, Mari?" They'd even shortened her name without permission, stripping it of its dignity. It was in the quarterly all-hands meeting, where Charles stood before his staff, boasting of the firm's unparalleled market instincts that had just netted a fortune on a pharmaceutical short. "It's about seeing the patterns others miss," he'd crow, his eyes sweeping the room and flickering over Marigold, who was quietly collecting discarded water bottles at the back. "You either have the gift or you don't. It's not something you can learn from a textbook." Marigold would simply nod, her face a mask of quiet servitude, her mind a mind that had built and sold to tech startups before she was 30, and now managed a vast, decentralized portfolio under the pseudonym M. Aurelius, already noting the fatal over-leverage in Charles's latest triumphant move. The rising tension became a physical pressure in the air the week of the firm's flagship investor gala. The office was a hurricane of arrogant activity. Charles was preparing to unveil the Winthrop Fund, a bold new venture he claimed would revolutionize ethical investing. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. Marigold had seen the confidential prospectus left on a printer. It was a shell game, funneling money into oppressive overseas mining operations. As she polished the brass plaque in the lobby, she listened to Charles rehearse his speech with his inner circle. "We're not just making money," he announced to his admiring deputies. "We're shaping a better world, a vision that requires a certain pedigree of thought." He didn't look at her, but the implication hung in the air, thicker than his cigar smoke. Later, she overheard him on a call, his voice dripping with condescension. "The cleaning staff? No, they're a separate, contracted service. Absolutely no connection to operations. Why would you even ask?" The man on the other end, she knew, was a journalist sniffing around the firm's labor practices. The shocking twist erupted not from the trading floor, but from the server room. On the night of the gala, as tuxedoed and gowned elites sipped champagne under crystal chandeliers, a catastrophic system failure hit Pinnacle. Every screen went dark. The live feed for Charles's big presentation died. Panic, quiet but profound, began to ripple through the wealthy crowd. Charles, sweating under the lights, barked into his headset, "IT, what is the meaning of this? Fix it now." But the IT chief, pale-faced, ran up to him and whispered frantically, "Sir, it's not a glitch. It's a remote lockout. All administrative access has been revoked. By the primary asset holder. Impossible." Charles hissed, "I am the primary holder." Just then, the massive presentation screen flickered back to life, but instead of the Pinnacle logo, it displayed a simple, elegant interface no one recognized alive. Global Asset Dashboard. At the bottom, a login name was visible, M_Aurelius. A collective gasp went through the room. M. Aurelius was the legend, the ghost, the most feared and respected anonymous investor in the world, known for toppling conglomerates with a single trade. From the shadowed service entrance at the side of the ballroom, a figure stepped into the light. It was Marigold. She had shed her scrubs for a simple, impeccably tailored black suit. Her scarf was gone, her natural silver-streaked hair framing a face now set with an expression of formidable calm. In her hand was not a mop, but a sleek tablet. She walked, unhurried, through the parted sea of stunned guests, right to the podium where Charles stood frozen. "You're looking for the primary asset holder." "Charles," she said, her voice, heard clearly for the first time, was low, melodic, and carried an undeniable weight of authority. She connected her tablet to the system. The dashboard on the big screen zoomed in, revealing a complex web of holdings. At its center was a 51% controlling stake in Pinnacle Capital Partners, acquired quietly over the last 18 months through a labyrinth of shell companies. The owner of record, Marigold Greene. The reversal of power was absolute, televised, and utterly merciless. Charles sputtered, This is fraud. You're a cleaner." "I am the owner," Marigold corrected, her eyes locking on his. "I took this job 3 years ago not because I needed the money, but because I needed to see the rot for myself. The racial discrimination in your hiring, the gender pay gap you brush under the rug, the ethical fund that exploits children in cobalt mines." She tapped her tablet. On the screen, private emails, derogatory audio recordings from the partners' lounge, and the damning prospectus flashed for all the investors and press to see. "You spoke of pedigree, Charles. You were right. Mine is one of resilience, intelligence, and patience. Yours is one of theft, deceit, and a staggering, inherited arrogance." She turned to the horrified, silent crowd. "As of this moment, Pinnacle Capital is dissolved. Its viable assets are being rolled into the new Aurelius Foundation, dedicated to funding minority-owned businesses and ethical tech. All non-management staff will receive triple severance and first consideration at the new entity." Then she looked back at Charles, whose empire was crumbling in real time on the screen behind him. "As for you and your partners, your personal assets are already frozen pending investigation by the SEC, whose agents are currently upstairs. I provided them with everything. The patterns you missed, Charles, were the ones leading to your own doorstep. The emotional, satisfying ending unfolded not in a courtroom, but in a sunlit community center in the Bronx 6 months later. Marigold, no longer invisible, sat at a simple desk, not in a corner office. She was reviewing business plans with a young black woman, aspiring to start a sustainable engineering firm. The air buzzed with the energy of startups she had funded. Her phone, buzzing with calls from world leaders and financial titans, lay ignored. A reporter, granted a rare interview, asked her why she didn't just expose Charles from the start. Why the years of silent humiliation? "Power observed from the top is an illusion," Marigold said, her gaze steady. "Real power is understanding the foundation. I needed to see every crack, every whispered insult, every entitled smirk. I needed to know precisely who they were before I showed them who I am. True change isn't a hostile takeover. It's a reclamation." She stood, offering her hand to the young entrepreneur with a warm, genuine smile, a smile none of the Pinnacle partners had ever seen. Outside, the city gleamed, and in a small, clean office, the woman they had called just to help was quietly, deliberately, rebuilding the world she had been forced to clean up after. The silence she once wore as a cloak was now her greatest weapon, and she wielded it with the grace of a queen who had finally reclaimed her throne.